Hello everybody and welcome back to The Lost Planeswalker. You're here with me, Jesse, the Lost Planeswalker, and today we're talking about the spoiled cards we got from the PAX announcement for Duskmourn. We have a ton of cards to cover, so we're going to jump right in, starting at looking at the special guest cards, because we got one additional special guest card, which is Damnation. Destroy all creatures, they can't be regenerated. I just figured we'd start here because this is a bonus sheet card and there's only one of them. Moving on to the next smallest, and I think what most people are interested in are going to be the commander deck commanders for this set. And then lastly, we'll move into the main set. But looking at the first commander in the Miracle Workers deck, we have Amanatu Veil Piercer. 1 white, blue, and a black. Ledger creature, human wizard. With at the beginning of your upkeep, Surveil 2. Okay, very cool there. And then each enchantment card in your hand has Miracle. Its Miracle cost is equal to its mana cost reduced by 4. Very, very cool. Like I predicted, we're going to have some Miracle play. This also revolves around enchantments, which was another theme that I had when we talked about the commander decks and what I thought they might do. So Amanatu, very cool card. I can see you casting some really big enchantments, whether you're putting them on top of your deck with some other effect, and then using Surveil to dig a little deeper or get whatever else you want right on top to be the first card you draw every turn. Amanatu is going to be very cool. I can't wait to see what other cards we play, but notably, it's just enchantment cards. So this could also be creatures you're reducing by 4, which is insane. This is a very, very cool commander, and I think there's going to be a lot of brewing around it. Next up in the Death Toll deck, we have Winter Cynical Opportunist. 2 black and a green ledger creature, human warlock with Death Touch. Whenever Winter attacks, mill 3 cards. Then it has Delirium. At the beginning of your end step, you may exile any number of cards from your graveyard with 4 or more card types among them. If you do, put a permanent card from among them onto the battlefield with a finality counter on it. So this deck is kind of similar to what I thought it would be, but not exactly. Obviously, no one's going to want to block Winter here because they have Death Touch, and it's so low power that you're probably going to be able to mill 3 cards each turn. In addition, being able to fill up your graveyard with all kinds of cards, especially cards that share creature or enchantment or artifact or, all those subtypes between them, will mean you can maximize your value. And of course, the payoff here is returning a permanent onto the battlefield with a finality counter on it. So that can be any number of different card types, and just bringing back, I don't know, whatever you want seems really, really great. I'm sure there's some certain decks where you're going to want to build around certain creatures types or enchantments or artifacts entering the battlefield, or maybe there's going to be combo pieces you're going to be able to get back with Winter. I'm sure this is going to be a great card to put in any number of decks, and I'm very excited to see it. Moving right over to the Jump Scare deck, we have Zimone Mystery Unraveler. 2 green and a blue. Ledger creature, human wizard with landfall. Whenever a land you control enters, manifest Dread. If this is the first time this ability is resolved this turn, otherwise you may put a permanent you control face up. So manifest Dread is a brand new ability that's coming out in this set, and I'm going to do a whole nother video covering all of those in a little bit more depth. But like it says there, to manifest Dread, look at the top 2 cards of your library, put one on the battlefield face down as a 2/2 creature and the other into your graveyard. Turn it face up for any time for its mana cost if it's a creature card. Now Zimone here, on additional landfall triggers, just lets those turn up for free, letting us cheat some really big creatures into play for playing lands. In addition, Manifest Dread is going to be a whole type throughout this entire set, so there's going to be plenty of cards to add to this deck or are coming out in this deck to do so. And lastly, and probably the commander the most people are going to be the most interested in, and I think honestly falls a bit short, Valgavoth, Harrower of Souls. 2 black and a red, ledger creature, elder demon with flying, ward, pay 2 life, and whenever an opponent loses life for the first time during each of their turns, put a +1/+1 counter on Valgavoth, Harrower of Souls, and draw a card. Now, I think there's a ton of cards that are going to help us make sure our opponents lose life on each of their turns. Yes, it has ward, which really in this case doesn't matter too much in commander. Paying 2 life doesn't really do much. And we're going to be able to draw a ton of cards. So I think this could work really well, but I think a lot of people are looking for a really big payoff versus an engine piece that's pretty easy to remove and doesn't offer any other evasion other than flying, which is really good, but is not as critical or as strong as I think people were hoping. And I think that leads to a good point. Every main commander is mana value 4, which is, I think, an important thing. I don't know if that was specifically designed for this set or not, but but it's going to make sure that you get to cast your commander at a decent rate compared to some of the main set cards that end up being a lot more expensive of all of these characters, except Amanatu, because we haven't gotten that revealed yet. But quickly looking over some of the other commander cards, I'm not quite sure what's going on here, but we have some Cryptghast, Dam, Exhume, which are very cool cards, and they're in this really interesting art. And then we have some like more horror posters of Goro's Vengeance, which is actually pretty expensive, Archon of Cruelty, and Living Death. All of these are very good cards that are very heavily played, so I'm quite interested to see, where these come out. I don't know if these are special variants we're getting in packs or what, but these are very cool cards, and I can't wait to get my hands on some of them. And finally, moving on to the main set cards, we have a lot of cards, and we have some really cool cycles of cards that we're getting. So let's dive right in. But before we do so, I just want to say, please consider subscribing. I'm going to be doing spoilers the entire next week, building commander decks, doing all kinds of stuff. So if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and stay tuned to see more. But let's start out by looking at Demonic Console. 1 in a black sorcery, search your library for a demon card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. But if you have Delirium, meaning if there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, instead search your library for any card and put it in your hand, then shuffle. What are we doing here? Yes, this is a sorcery, but Delirium is really not that hard to hit, and there's so many decks that this kind of card can go in. I mean, I'm definitely going to be playing this. Yeah, this is really good. This is going to be a card I think is going to get really expensive real quick, and it's a rare, so we'll get a bunch of copies of it, and it'll hover, maybe around $20, $25 for a while. Maybe it'll fall back down after people aren't playing it too much, but 2 mana really is not that much, and it's quite easy to hit Delirium, so I think that this is going to be a great card. Next is Disturbing Mirth, a black and a red enchantment. When it enters, you may sack another enchantment or creature. If you do, draw 2 cards. That seems pretty great to me. When you sack Disturbing Mirth, manifests dead. So it seems like what you want to do, honestly, is play this and then play another copy of it. This seems like a pretty cool standard card where you're going to be manifesting dead, you're going to be drawing cards, all from just replacing this enchantment over and over again. So very cool card, and I don't think Rakdos needs any help, but they're sure getting it. Next is one of the brand new enchantment types called Rooms. And these cards are a little tricky, so we'll run through them real quick with how they work. So starting out, you have 2 cards basically that you can decide to cast. Like the reminder text says there, you may cast either half. That door unlocks on the battlefield, and as a sorcery, you may pay the mana cost of the locked door to unlock it. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to go into this room and you're going to pay one of the 2 mana costs. Then one side is going to be locked and the other one is going to be open, or the one you paid for. Later on at sorcery speed, you can also pay to unlock the other half of the room so that the entire room is unlocked, and this will go into a brand new ability called Eerie, and we'll get there later on in this video. But whenever 1 or more non-toy creatures you control attack a player, create a 1/1 white toy artifact creature token. And then at Porcelain Gallery there, creatures you control have base power and toughness equal to the number of creatures you control. So you can see that at the first half of this card, you can end up making a bunch of 1/1 white toy artifact creature tokens, and then later on for 6 mana, make them all very large. Now obviously this is a mythic card, and that Porcelain Gallery is actually pretty sick. I could see this popping off very quickly. 6 mana for that ability does not seem too busted, and you can definitely win the game from there. Moving on to another very cool card here, we have Enduring Innocence. 1 white enchantment creature, Sheep Glimmer with lifelink. Whenever 1 or more other creatures you control with power 2 or less enter, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. Then when Enduring Innocence dies, if it was a creature returned to the battlefield under its owner's control, it's an enchantment. These enduring cycle of cards I think are going to be a problem, okay? And I say that because I love this ability and I love cards like this, and people want to remove cards like this and bring them back as enchantments and just make it that much harder to remove. Wow. Enduring is going to be very cool. I can see these cards end up going for, I don't know if $10 sounds too much for this, but basically giving you really good protection. If a board wipe happens, guess what? It's back as an enchantment and you have to use more removal to remove it. I think that these cards are going to be very, very good. So talking about one cycle, which is this Enduring cycle, let's move on to the next one here with Fear. Fear was a cycle we've already seen some cards of with Fear of Missing Out, but we have some other Fear cards here with Fear of Immobility and Fear of Lost Teeth.
So Fear of Immobility is 4 and a white enchantment creature nightmare. When it enters, tap up to 1 target creature. If an opponent controls that creature, put a stun counter on it. An ability we will be getting later on called Survival could benefit from you tapping one of your own creatures, but putting stun counters on your opponent's creatures are also pretty great. Now this is a 4/4 for 5 mana, but it is a common, so that's actually a quite fun effect. Fear of Lost Teeth is a single black enchantment creature nightmare with when Fear of Lost Teeth dies, it deals 1 damage to any target and you gain 1 life. A pretty good 1-drop guy that's going to ping and gain you some life, so I really love this. Whether you want to play enchantments or you want to gain some life or deal some damage, there's a lot of good things about these cards, and I can't wait to see more of the Fear cards. But moving on, we have Hauntwoods Shrieker, another mythic for 1 green creature beast mutant, and whenever Hauntwoods Shrieker attacks, manifest dead, which is a very fun effect that we already talked about. But for 1 and a green, reveal target face down permanent. If it's a creature card, you may turn it face up. Yeah, this is very, very powerful. Being able to cheat things into play, and instead of casting them for the mana cost, just playing 1 and a green to flip them is insane. I think that there's definitely going to be some decks revolving around this card, and it doesn't have any protection, so you're gonna have to run some, but this looks very, very cool. And this alternate art is just spooky, and another mirror, I believe, variant art, so spooky card. So now let's look at the only Planeswalker in this set. I guess we're only getting Planeswalkers 1 at a time now, but we have Kaito, Bane of Nightmares. 2 blue and a black. Legendary Planeswalker Kaito, that it has ninjutsu, which I think is super fun on a Planeswalker, but 1 blue and a black. During your turn, as long as Kaito has 1 or more loyalty counters on him, he's a 3/4 ninja creature and has hexproof. Very, very cool. +1, you get an emblem with ninjas you control, get +1/+1, which right off the bat seems way too strong. For 0, Surveil 2, then draw a card for each opponent who lost life this turn. Okay, that's also really busted. And then -2, tap target creature, put 2 stun counters on it. I don't know what they were thinking. I mean, I don't know if they were thinking they wanted to make the new best, Dimir Planeswalker, but I think Kaito's it. This is so cool. You can ninjutsu it in. It's a creature on your turn. You give it emblems, so it makes it bigger on your turn. Surveil, tapping. All of these are really good abilities. It's not too expensive to cast, so I think a lot of people are want to get their hands on this card, and I don't blame them. It's very, very fun. Then we have Norn, Swift Survivalist, single red legendary creature human coward, which is very fun. Cowards are coming back. Norn, Swift Survivalist, can't block. Whenever a creature you control becomes blocked, you may exile it. You may play that card from exile this turn. So whether you're playing things that care about you casting cards from exile or just hitting some ETB abilities multiple times, I think that this is a very cool card and probably something I'm going to build around because it's quite unique in the way that it works. Now, moving over to the Overlord cycle, we already got Overlord of the Hauntwoods. Now we have Overlord of the Mistmoors. 5 white enchantment creature avatar horror with impending 4 for 2 white, meaning that for 4 mana that you're going to put 4 time counters on this, and it's going to be an enchantment until those time counters are removed, and then it enters the battlefield as a creature. But when Overlord of the Mistmoors enters or attacks, create 2 2/1 white insect creature tokens with flying. So the way that this was kind of explained to me was these are kind of similar to the Titan cycle that we received a long time ago, where this is pretty similar to Grave Titan, but we have creatures with flying, and you can cast this at a much higher discounted rate. Now, this isn't going to do much. Maybe it's going to trigger some enchantment support until this comes into the battlefield full if you cast it for its impending cost, or maybe you have ways to remove those. Next, we have Peer Past the Veil. 2 red and a green. Discard your hand, then draw X cards, where X is the number of card types among cards in your graveyard. This is quite neat. This is definitely playing into that Delirium theme. We want to have a ton of different card types so that we can discard our hand and draw a bunch into it. I don't really know, though, how good I'm feeling about this personally. I feel like for 4 mana, you may not draw as many cards as you want, but maybe you just need to, refill your hand with whatever you can. So it's going to be good. In addition, you're discarding your hand first, so if you have a bunch of different card types in there, that'll definitely help. Next, a card I think I really like, but it's just so spooky, is Razorkin Needlehead. 2 red creature human assassin with Razorkin Needlehead has first strike during your turn. Whenever an opponent draws a card, this deals 1 damage to them. This effect is always super good, especially in decks that are going to want to draw a ton of cards. I can see this dealing a massive amount of damage in Standard, or really any format you're playing it in, because it's going to trigger every turn, and it just gets better and better the more you have, because it is not legendary, meaning you can have 4 of these in play, or play a bunch of copy spells and just make as many copies of this as possible. Next, we have Split Up. 1 white sorcery, choose 1, destroy all tapped creatures, or destroy all untapped creatures. A pretty cool way to get some benefit. You know, you're going to cast this at sorcerer speed, so you're probably going to cast this during your first main phase, and maybe your opponents have all their creatures tapped. Guess what? You get to destroy all of them. Or maybe you swing out, all your opponents have untapped creatures, destroy those instead. A lot of versatility here, and I think it's a very cool way to run a board wipe. Then next up, we have the Jolly Balloon Man, which is horrifying. 1 red and a white, ledger creature, human clown with haste. 1 in tap, create a token that's a copy of another target creature you control, except it's a 1/1 red balloon creature in addition to its other colors and types, and it has flying and haste. Sack it at the beginning of the next end step, activate only as a sorcery. So this is going to want to make copies of your creatures. It's going to want to deal combat damage triggers. That's why it's giving it flying and haste. So I think there's a lot of interesting cards you could build around, and as disgusting as this guy is, I might have to build around to see what kind of nonsense you can get into. Talking about some guy who gets in some crazy nonsense, we have Tyvar the Pummeler, which this card was on Scryfall, so it's official, but it must be some sort of leak card or something, the way it looks like. But for 1 green, we get a ledger creature elf warrior with tap another untapped creature you control. Tyvar the Pummeler gains indestructible until end of turn, and tap it. So basically you can give this indestructible. I'm not quite sure, why you're tapping it. I guess if you're attacking, it's already tapped, so that doesn't matter. Or also, if you're blocking, it just becomes tapped after that. I'm not sure why that first section is written the way it is. It sounds kind of weird, honestly. But next up, we have 3 green. Creatures you control get +X until end of turn, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. Just an insanely powerful ability. It's not too expensive either, so I think that this is actually very cool, and it's going to buff up your entire team probably for the win. Next is one of my favorite cards. We got spoiled because I'm very excited to see how this develops further and how people start using it, but Unwanted Remake. White instant, destroy target creature, its controller manifests dead. We have a single white removal spell. It's an instant speed. It's going to give our opponent a 2/2 that maybe can flip into something bigger, but I think that's worth it. Very cheap kill spell, so I'm excited to see more. And we're moving into the final couple cards here. We have Valgavoth's Lair, an enchantment land. Very neat. With hexproof, Valgavoth's Lair enters tapped. As it enters, choose a color, and tap, add 1 mana of the chosen color. This is some great mana fixing. I can definitely see this card end up being very expensive, because this fixes any mana you want. It can't be interacted with, which I wasn't really sure that it was going to be interacted with, but I think maybe because it's an enchantment and you can destroy enchantments, this is going to help protect it from being removed off the battlefield. And I can see so many upsides to this card, meaning you can play 4 of them in a deck. I think that this is going to get pretty crazy. Talking about Valgavoth, we have Valgavoth Terror Eater. 6 black, legendary creature elder demon with flying, lifelink, ward, sack 3 non-land permanents, and if a card you don't control would be put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. Which, reading through it just took me a couple times. It just sounds rather weird the way that it's worded. So basically, if you don't control that card at some point, I guess, and it goes into your opponent's graveyard, you're just going to exile it. And then during your turn, you may play cards exiled with Valgavoth. If you could cast a spell this way, pay life equal to its mana value rather than paying its mana cost. Obviously, this is lifelink, so it's going to give you the mana or give you the ability to play those spells that are exiled with it. And I'm pretty sure this works from anywhere. It just says if a card you don't control would be put into an opponent's graveyard. So I don't know if it has to be controlled or what yet. I'm going to be looking into this card some more because I definitely have to build a deck around it. But, maybe we have some mill nonsense. Maybe we have some sacrifice or discard nonsense. We'll get into it, but I think this is a very fun card, and for 9 mana, yeah, it better be good. Next up, we have Veteran Survivor, single white creature human survivor with survival. At the beginning of your second main phase, if Veteran Survivor is tapped, exile up to 1 target card from a graveyard. As long as there are 3 or more cards exiled with Veteran Survivor, it gets +3/+3 and has hexproof. So basically, survival is another new keyword that checks to see at the beginning of your second main phase if a certain card is tapped. And if it is tapped, then you get a certain ability, which in this case is exiling cards, which is very powerful. And then if you have a certain number of cards exiled, it gets +3/+3. This would be a super fun card to play multiple of, because if you can exile cards with it very quickly, each additional copy is just going to get that +3/+3 because it sees a Veteran Survivor. So if you have multiple in the deck, it'll just count all of them. So a 5/4 for 1 mana sounds pretty good. Next up, a character I was very excited to see, and I'm glad we got to see it at the Commander decks, was of course Winter Misanthropic Guide. 1 black, red, green legendary creature human warlock with ward 2. At the beginning of your upkeep, each player draws 2 cards, which is a very interesting ability for a Jund card to have. But we go into the second one with Delirium. As long as there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, each opponent's maximum hand size is equal to 7 minus the number of those cards. This means right off the bat, if we can hit Delirium, our opponents can only have 3 cards at once. And as we continue to add to that Delirium count, that reduces their hand size more and more, which makes sense why this first ability has them drawing 2 cards at the beginning, because there could be a point in the game where they only have 2 cards at any one point, and that's pretty terrifying. Winter here is pretty strong. You're definitely going to have to run some additional protection other than just the ward to keep people from removing him. But, you know, I don't know. This kind of feels like a feel-bad card if you play this. So I'm interested to see how the community reacts to this as we see some decks revolving around it. And lastly, we have Zimone All Questioning. 1 green, blue, ledger creature, human wizard with at the beginning of your end step, if a land entered the battlefield under your control this turn, and you control a prime number of lands, create Primo the Indivisible, a legendary 0/0 green and blue fractal creature token. Then put that many +1/+1 counters on it. It then goes on to say that 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, 17, 19, 23, 29, and 31 are prime numbers. You're going to have some really interesting nonsense here where you're going to be wanting to have exactly a certain number of lands so you can continually make Primo legendary creature tokens. In addition, you're playing green, which is just going to be making multiple copies of this token. You have cards like Zern Orb that make sure that you have a certain number of lands every turn. You have ways to bring a ton of lands onto the battlefield with all different kinds of abilities. So I think Zimone here is going to be really fun. I don't know honestly how strong it's going to be. Obviously, you're going to be making a ton of tokens, and I guess if you can do it quick enough, then it's definitely super powerful, but we'll have to see. I mean, this might be a deck I build, but there's a lot of really cool cards in this set, and that's it for today. This was a super cool first day of spoilers. Starting back on the 2nd, I believe, we are going to get more spoilers, or the 3rd, something like that, and I hope you'll stay tuned to my videos, see more. Please subscribe, comment down below, you know, what kind of cards do you expect? What was your favorite card from today? If you would leave a comment down below, it'd mean the world to me. Even if you just said hi, I'll say hi back. I really appreciate it. You know, in addition, like I said, please leave a like, share this video with a friend, and subscribe. That would mean the world to me. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Now, today's Scryfall card of the day is Zealous Inquisitor. I only return what rightfully belongs to another. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you later, Planeswalkers.